My cameras just do not stay clean. We need to talk. I love both of these cameras. We're looking at the Sony FX3 and the Panasonic S5 II. I love both of these cameras for totally different reasons, and they're both very, very, very powerful cameras for what they do. A lot of you guys that have been following for a while know I am obsessed with Anamorphics, and this camera is amazing for Anamorphics. But this camera is more aligned with the camera I'm filming on right now, which is the A7R5, more aligned as in a hybrid system rather than a dedicated cinema camera, if you want to call that, whatever. So I just kind of want to go over some things, and I wish the FX3 has some things that the S5 II did, and I wish the S5 II was just a different form factor, more like the FX3. So I'm gonna start with the biggest thing for me is the menu system on the S5 II. It's pretty crazy that we're getting even more cinema camera features within this camera than we are at the FX3. My only complaint with the FX3 is it doesn't have a shutter angle. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you don't need shutter angle, blah, blah, blah. When you're on a job and you're flipping back and forth and you're used to using cinema cameras, you forget to change your shutter speed. It's happened to me so many times and it's ruined so many shots. Shutter angle is kind of a necessity. This camera has that. It has waveforms. You can move that waveform box wherever you want. You can make it smaller, you can make it bigger, and you can move it across the screen. That's insane that we're able to do this. The next thing we have is open gate recording. I'm personally not a fan of the trend of the 4:3 crops. Again, I love anamorphics. I'm on a total different spectrum on what my eye likes. Open gate comes in handy when you're trying to film for horizontal and vertical content. Because in post, you go in, you can make a vertical crop, or you can make a horizontal crop out of it. It just makes life easier in this age where we have to, like, no matter how much we hate vertical, it's part of our life now and it sucks. It is what it is. But on top of that, for anamorphic, so this is the Nanomorph 65mm. This is a 1.5x anamorphic. This is super cool when you shoot an open gate because the final deliverable is around like a 16:9 to like a 2:1 type of aspect ratio. So I'm able to use this combo and film YouTube videos and have the final deliverables. I don't have to crop it out. So like right now, I'm on the Nanomorph 35mm with the Laowa 1.3x stretch anamorphic front adapter. It's basically a 2x anamorphic, and I'm on the A7R5 and that reads down to 16:9, so we're losing the top and the bottom. On top of that, when you stretch out a 16:9 by 2x, you should see how wide this shot is. It's pretty ridiculous, and it makes it hard to focus. It makes it hard to monitor. I have a 7-inch monitor over here, and it's still very difficult to see what the heck is going on in it. And so having open gate just allows you to use the full sensor. So when you're shooting anamorphic, you're getting all the edge characteristics, and it's a whole different ball game. You can still shoot anamorphic on the FX3, but they don't make it as easy. They only have a 1.3 and a 2x D-stretch in camera, and it doesn't D-stretch the file, where on the S5 II, it pretty much gives you every D-stretch option from like 1.3 all the way up to 2x and everything in between it. It's pretty crazy. So even when you're trying to monitor on the back of your camera, it just makes it easier because it's able to, again, use that open gate. And so you're filling out more of your monitor and you're filling out more of your final deliverable. Overall, the quality is pretty similar in my opinion. The S5 II's colors look pretty amazing. The FX3 you can stretch to make it look however you want. Anybody that's complaining that Sony colors look like garbage, you guys are behind, and maybe you should look into yourself and educating yourself on how to color grade, because pretty much any camera that comes with the log format, you're able to push however you want. Personally, I despise using mirrorless cameras as cinema cameras. It's just, there's a lot, I don't know, they're just not made to be used like a, this is my main cinema camera right now. This is the red Komodo X. You see, you can properly build this thing out, and when you're using cinema glass on this, it can hold it. So obviously this is a similar size and it looks like the same form factor, but don't get it twisted, it is not. The difference is when you're using a mirrorless hybrid camera, you have to go back between stills and video. And so you have all those menus that are mixing up, and all the knobs are set out mainly off of photography base, and you're trying to use that as a cinema setup. But on the FX3, it's a little bit more different, where they make these little tweaks and it just makes it easier to use as a video camera. Now let's get into what I like about the FX3 more. This is why I wish these two cameras can be combined. It would be amazing. One, the S5 II, in order to get 60 frames per second, you have to go in to the 1.5x crop mode. I despise that. Crop sensors are fine. Obviously the Red Komodo X is a crop sensor, but it's getting way more image quality than all these cameras combined. It's just annoying that anytime you want to flip over to 60 FPS, you're going to have to switch out your lens. You're going to have to zoom in. If you're using primes, you have to switch out the prime. It's a big hassle if you're going to actually try to use this on actual jobs. Where on the FX3, you get 60 frames per second in the full frame mode. Again, not in open gate. Also, that's one quick note too. The open gate's 420 on here and not 422. So you are losing some quality when you go to open gate, but I'd rather have that than no open gate at all. Sony, come on. That leads me to rolling shutter. The rolling shutter on FX3 is amazing. Obviously is not, let me put this camera down. Obviously, it's not a global shutter like the Red Komodo X or the original Red Komodo. You can see it. The rolling shutter on this is very bad. It's on par with the A7R5, but again, the A7R5 is a 60 megapixel stills camera that does amazing video as well. It's weird because the FX3 is kind of like my main camera right now, but anytime I use the S5 II, I'm always like, why am I not using this more? And the last thing I'll touch on is the Cine EI mode. That thing's kind of a game changer in my opinion for these smaller type cinema cameras. Let's go back to the Red Komodo X real quick. When you're shooting a RAW on the Red Komodo X, your ISO doesn't matter. Your ISO basically is changing the exposure on your monitor, and so you can expose accordingly to that. Cine EI mode is basically the same exact thing. So when you're in the low range, your midpoint's ISO 800. So when you change your ISO, it's really not doing anything internally in the camera. It's just changing the exposure on your monitor, which again can affect how you expose your image. I think where people start getting lost in Cine EI is on top of what we just spoke about, you have two base ISOs. So you have an 800 ISO and a 12,800 ISO. So the same thing applies when you're in the low base ISO of 800. When you go to 12,800, no matter where you shift it, your camera stays at 12,800. And again, it's just changing the exposure on your monitor preview. At the end of the day, these both look amazing in image quality. The S5 II has a little bit more punch, and it has, I feel like, I don't know if it has more color fidelity, but there's something there about the colors. But overall, the FX3 is just a little bit more of a put together option, even though Sony is excluding some very important features that a cinema camera badge camera should have. So Sony, please give us at least shutter angle. So anyone that's just getting into video and you're looking for a camera, you got to either pick, do you want a Sony ecosystem and possible other amazing cameras to come out in the future? Or do you want to invest into the Panasonic Lumix collection, where I think it's kind of, they've been making amazing cameras, but the S5 II, I think is kind of a new generation for them. So I feel like it's like a whole reboot for them. So honestly, you can't go wrong with either one. I think you just kind of need to look into the future, where you want to take your career or where you want to take your hobby, whatever you are, and see which lineup you want to invest in. I don't think you go wrong with either one, honestly. But yeah, that's it. Peace.